To call this meeting of the Senate Agriculture and Consumer Affairs Committee to order. To start off with, I'd like to ask Senator Sam Watson to say a quick prayer for us, please.
All right, let's pray. Dear Father, we just thank you for this day and thank you for all many blessings. Just ask and pray that you'll be with us in this meeting and just lead and guide and direct us, and just ask and pray that you'll be with our farms and our families back home and while we're away, and just watch over and protect them. In your name we pray, amen.
All right. Thank you, Senator Watson. Our first presenter today is our good friend, Miss Mary Atkins. Miss Mary, thank you. We asked her to come and just kind of give us an overview of what the Ag and Consumer Affairs Committee covers. And Miss Mary, if you don't mind, we're going to give the floor to you.
Like Chairman Goodman said, my name's Mary Atkins, and I work with the Office of Policy and Legislative Analysis. I will say the first slide on this presentation, that's actually my grandmother's cattle farm in Chickamauga, Georgia, where she still lives at 90 years old. So I just wanted to give her a little shout out there. Black Angus. All right. So also, originally my presentation had a lot more facts in them, but they all came from the University of Georgia, who is presenting following me, so I sort of retooled it a little bit. But so generally speaking, the Committee on Agriculture and Consumer Affairs has jurisdiction over agricultural land use, commodities, commissions, fairs and expositions, marketing and consumer protection issues, pest management, the use of pesticides, and consumer protection. So I thought it would be beneficial to go over the legislation that passed out of the committee last year briefly. And excuse me, I did not bring my glasses, so I'll have to really focus on this. So the first bill that was passed last year was Senate Bill 103, which updated the policies and procedures of the Unclaimed Property Department. And the next bill was House Bill 132, the authorization of the use of ungraded or rough cut lumber in the construction of certain structures. House Bill 528, the Georgia Online Renewal Transparency Act. So that's kind of where you get more into the consumer protection aspect of what this committee does. And then the last bill that was passed out was House Bill 545, which created the Commodity Commission for Citrus Fruits. And that is a picture from a Georgia citrus grove. So we only have one piece of recommitted legislation, but it was a bill that we heard several times, and that's SB 34, which has to do with third-party food delivery safety, which is something that I think almost everyone has experience with. So the bill defines third-party delivery service as a company, organization, or entity that facilitates the delivery of ready-to-eat food from a food service establishment to a customer through a website, mobile application, platform, or other electronic service. The bill prohibits a third-party delivery service from arranging for the delivery of food from a restaurant to a customer without entering into a contractual agreement with particular specifications that are outlined in the bill. It also prohibits a third-party delivery service from using a restaurant's name, likeness, registered trademark, or intellectual property without obtaining the restaurant's consent unless the use is permitted under federal or state law and accompanied by a disclaimer that's also enumerated in the bill. And this is really the meat of that legislation. It requires that ready-to-eat food be delivered through a third party, that is delivered through a third-party delivery service must be transported with the 5 requirements. 1, in a clean vehicle. 2, at a safe holding temperature maintained through the use of appropriate thermal containers. 3, in a tamper-resistant sealed container. 4, in a vehicle free of animals unless the animal is a service dog. And lastly, in a vehicle where smoking and vaping is prohibited while the food items are present. It also makes the third-party delivery services liable for any harm caused by a failure to comply with these requirements. So that is our only recommitted bill for this year. And since the University of Georgia is going to speak after me, I thought that I would actually look into some USDA statistics and provide them for y'all from the agriculture census. Unfortunately, it's only conducted every 5 years, and the new data is released in about 2 weeks on Valentine's Day. So this data is a little bit old, but I will say that the website is wonderful if you're looking into any particular thing about producers. You can find everything from the average age of producers, and it goes down to county, so federal, state, county level. So it's really great. It's a really great data source. So it is a complete count of U.S. farms and ranches and the people who operate them. I believe the first one was conducted in 1997. Even small plots of land are included, whether rural or urban, and they can grow fruit, vegetables, or some animals if $1,000 or more of product is sold. It's, again, taken once every 5 years. It looks at land use and ownership, operator characteristics, production practices, and income and expenditures. And again, it is going to be released in a couple of weeks, the new one. But in it states that Georgia's agricultural producers sold more than $9.57 billion worth of agricultural products. The total farm gate value for the state was about $12 billion. There were 42,439 farms in Georgia, encompassing approximately 9 million acres of land with an average size of 235 acres. And again, this is really useful information because it goes down to the county as well. More than 17,000 of those farms raised cattle, either beef cows or dairy cows. More than 13,000 farms grew cotton during 2020, planting 810,000 acres. Georgia produced 3.3 billion pounds of peanuts, and farmers across the state planted over approximately 400,000 acres of corn and produced 70 million bushels. So it has information on every single row crop, livestock raised. It's really, really a great resource and tool to use. And finally, this is the most current USDA information as of October of this year. I think the data is from 2022, but again, it sort of lags behind. So as you can tell, Georgia leads the country in the production of a lot of crops, peanuts, pecans, broiler chicken rather. So we really are leading the country in a lot of these industries. That's my presentation.
Well, thank you, Ms. Mary. We appreciate it. I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot to turn it on. Well, thank you, Ms. Mary. We appreciate you very much with all the work that you do with this committee, with the Office of Policy and Legislative Analysis, and we thank you for putting this together for us.
Thanks.
And we look forward to having a good session this year, and appreciate everything you do for us.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Okay. All right. Hold on just 1 minute, Mary.
Okay.
Number 5, Senator Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mary, the difference between the farm products sold of $9.7 billion and the gate value $12.2 billion, is that further processing of the products that are actually sold retail at the farm, or what's the delta there? Why is that a different figure?
I believe that is correct, what you're saying, but I can research that and get back to you. I don't want to give you inaccurate information, but I believe so.
Do you know, Mr. Chairman?
I don't.
All right, thank you. I'll look to hear from you on that. Thanks.
All righty. Next, we're gonna any more questions? Well, okay. Will Bentley, where are you at? Will's going to come introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since I am speaking or introducing in between an attorney.
Will, for anybody here that doesn't know,
Oh.
tell everybody what
Will
capacity
Bentley with the
you serve.
Georgia Agribusiness Council. Appreciate you letting me be here. Last week, Chairman Goodman asked if he could speak to somebody to talk a little bit about the economic situation going on in Georgia agriculture. And I know the most famous words under this building is, "I'm not an attorney," but my response was, "Well, I'm not an economist, but I'll find you one." So that's what we've done. Several of you have students that are kids or grandkids or nieces and nephews at the University of Georgia, and if they're in the College of Ag, I would recommend asking friendly questions to the next speaker because they'll probably come through his class. And as Jake Matthews learned a minute ago when he introduced himself as his best student, Dr. Campbell said, "You were a student." But we have Dr. Ben Campbell with us, who came to the University of Georgia in 2016, has an extension teaching appointment as well as an extension coordinator, and let him go through all his many different PhDs and everything that he knows. But I'll introduce Dr. Ben Campbell to speak to the group.
So thank you for having me. My name is Ben Campbell. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Ag and Applied Economics at the University of Georgia. I do have a lot of students come through. And as far as Mary's thing about the Center of Agriculture, nobody's more excited than us economists about getting that data. 5 years is a long time to wait for us. So when I was asked to speak, I was given probably 30, 45 minutes. So I put on my professor hat and I said, okay, I can go for an hour and a half. So I put a lot of stuff in here. So if I speed through it, it's, sorry. I need to, when I was doing it together, when I do this and do that and do this. So I keep adding. That being said, just a little bit about our department. We are working on a lot of the issues we'll be talking about today. We have renowned experts that are dealing with respect to everything from cotton, peanuts, fruit and vegetables, row crops, livestock, dairy, anything and everything you can think of. We also have a hospitality program in our department that's looking at agritourism, those type of issues as well. So the issues we're going to talk about, we are working on them to our best of our abilities. A little bit Georgia Ag Snapshot. For those who were in Tifton on Friday, the Georgia Ag Snapshots that our department and the college puts out was released. So we'll go through some of those numbers for last year. So commodity overviews of trends happening with respect to overall commodity trends, then trends in ag, then issues impacting ag. That's where we'll go. Real quick, so yeah, ag is the number one industry in the state by a long shot. $18.3 billion in the farm gate values. What we came up with and through surveying county extension agents and they surveying producers, it was roughly $14.7 billion in 2021. And so these are 2022 numbers. $84 billion in economic footprint directly related to the industries. So if you think of ag on the farm, well, they had to pay labor, they hired truckers, they had all these things. That goes in as well. So farm gate value is different than economic footprint. So $84 billion industry, over 300,000 jobs directly related to Georgia ag. So big industry doing a lot with respect to the state. If you look at things that sort of Mayor is bringing up with respect to Georgia ag commodities, we are a diverse state. We have everything from livestock, broilers, cotton that are big, pecans, blueberries, corn, greenhouse nursery throughout. And it's not centralized in one spot. The map on the left shows that across the board, pretty much every county has ag going on in it, some bigger than others, but is moving forward. And the industries that are supported are diverse from trucking, to all the way to real estate, all the way down. So big industry is what we're doing. With respect to looking at commodities, what's happening? If you think of livestock, this is projections from USDA that you have across the board, you have animal production increasing through 2031, so that's good. Most of that export markets is where that product is going. The projection from USDA going for the next 10 years. If you think of cotton domestic meal use is sort of stabilized. A lot of that production is now going to overseas. It's being exported to other countries. So we're moving a lot of that product to international markets. But what's really interesting, if you look at projections, we're not really picking up a lot of market share. We're losing, or other countries are picking up that share, especially like South America, are picking up picking up cotton market share over the next 10 years. Think of oil and the oil seeds and peanuts. Again, sort of stabilized projections that we're not really growing that much. We're sort of moving forward as we are. So stability in soybean markets and other markets. So there's not a lot of growth with respect to what we can see and expect now through 2031. Fruit and vegetables, probably one of the areas that a lot of issues are happening in. We do see growth, but if you look at the chart on the right, you'll see a lot of that imports are increasing dramatically. Those green lines, it shows that the projections are that we're going to start importing more and more product, fruit and vegetables, into this country. And we'll talk about it a little bit of why that's the case, but with respect to that's concerning, especially as those markets continue to have lower prices and can compete at a better at different levels. I do a lot in nursery greenhouse turf. One of the only industries probably that really not excited about COVID, but benefited from it. When COVID, everybody went and had to be at their homes. They were quarantined. Everybody bought plants. So nursery and greenhouse benefited quite a bit from everybody staying home, buying plants and landscaping materials. That effect is wearing off. We do see a changing nature of how people are buying, because if you look, now homes are bigger with the same area of space, so we have less landscape area to actually produce on or to put plants on. And this industry really relying on housing starts. So housing starts are a big issue with respect to, as housing starts increase, then we are continuing to increase, then we see that there will be continued growth in the industry. So again, this is one of the industries really dependent on, compared to other industries, that's reliant on what happens in the economy, especially housing starts. National trends with respect to what's happening farm-wise, and this is Georgia as well, what we're seeing is that small farms make up a large number of the farms out there, but large farms make up a large proportion of the product that we're actually consuming. So this goes into, we want to increase large, small farms, but again, with respect to feeding the country, it is large farms doing it. How do we ensure those firms, those businesses continue in the future and can get financing to actually continue to expand or to grow their operations? Cash receipts with respect to what happened. This is fall 2023. Again, we saw cash receipts fall for the most part across commodities. Corn, soybeans, fruit and vegetables roughly stayed the same. The big probably difference was cattle. It went up. Cattle prices went up, so thereby we saw that cash receipts went up. But USDA, the big reason for we're seeing decreases across most commodities is pricing. Price volatility and decreasing prices have led to a lot of commodities having decreased price receipts. So that's one of the big things with respect to ag is having to deal with. How do we deal with volatility in the markets, especially when we have decreasing prices? Projections for prices in 2023 and in 2024, pretty much across the board, expected lower prices. That being said, that's an issue because we see that labor costs are going up and other costs are increasing. How do we now deal with prices? How do we deal with prices with respect to that are going down? Right. So that's putting a squeeze on producers throughout the Georgia on how they actually are going to deal with these different issues, especially prices going down and input costs going up. Maybe not as much as they were a couple years ago, but they're still higher compared to what they were. Cash net farm income, again, economists speak, but again, what we're doing, we see big number here is those percent changes. Across the board, pretty much negatives. That's very concerning. So that's basically the profitability of these firms is decreasing. And, if you're looking for financing or you're looking to grow your farm or just stay in business, that's really concerning for our producers when we see net farm income starting to decrease. Again, it's not typical, not just us in the southeast region, but across the country. We've probably mitigated a little more than other areas. You see that, the heartland, negative 12% on net farm income. But again, we have negative 2%. That's a big number when you're a producer trying to keep up and trying to continue the future, and especially if you want your kids to do it and they see that, your profitability is decreasing. That can be an issue, especially when we talk about succession planning, which we'll talk about in a little bit. How do we now guarantee that those farms will be there in the future, given that we have sort of lower income coming to families? With respect to what's happening, one of the big things we talk about is markets, especially internationally and domestically. Growing economy is really good. People are buying goods. They're buying goods in excess or more than they usually do, or they're buying different goods. In this case, what we're seeing is developed countries generally have a slower GDP growth compared to developing countries. So what this tells us is those markets are out there to go international. Those consumers are going to be demanding products at a higher rate than what they're currently doing. And so how do we get in those markets? How do we now compete on the international level with products from Georgia and the U.S.? How do we compete given that competition is going to be extremely high to get in those new markets as GDP increases? Because it's a lot higher than what we're seeing in developed countries. With respect to production costs, this is probably one of the biggest things that we're dealing with is how do producers in the state or how do companies in the state in ag, how do we deal with these increased production costs? Labor costs have gone up, projected going up. We see some costs going down, fertilizer projected decrease, which I think we're seeing a little bit. But again, that offset is that you have other costs going up. You have rent going up, you have property tax going up, you have interest expense going up. So all these things. So you might see a little small reduction in prices of chemicals. But again, that increase in production prices the increased production cost is coming from those other inputs that are increasing, which is a big issue. Again, if we look at how much things changed from 2020 in the farm production expenses, drastically. So how do you deal with this if you are a producer and your costs doubled? That's one of the things, especially as prices start to decrease. How do we deal with these things? We're departmentally working on those things. I know you are as well. But as far as from a producer standpoint, from an ag industry standpoint, you have costs that are not mitigating, not coming down, or very little coming down, if that, and you have prices now that are starting to decrease, and that margin goes down considerably. That's a big issue that's causing concern in the industry. With respect to big things, there are positives in the industry. It's not all bad. Ag's like a family. If you think if there's a storm or anything like that, farmers come together, ag industry comes together. We have a major port that's really helping. We have water and a growing willingness to succeed. But there are major issues that are actually hitting the industry with respect to, we need to think about economy, changing consumers, input costs, labor, all those things with respect to it. I'm going to touch on a lot of these just really quickly, just to give a blueprint of what all the things we're dealing with that producers are having to think about as they go about making decisions. Should I stay in business? What to plant? How do we deal? So with respect to Georgia specifically, we see an projected increase in GDP or Georgia state product next year, roughly at the rate equivalent to what the U.S. is experiencing. So we'll grow hopefully roughly the same rate, which is good news. Growth now, people are buying, have maybe more money to buy with, and that are able to spend. Problem, though, is this is confidence. This is the consumer confidence. And what we're seeing is the U.S. is lagging behind in consumer confidence compared to other parts of the world. So the economy may be growing, but people are still really concerned about what the economy is going to do, what they're going to be doing. So now we may tend to hold back some spending where we could buy goods or different things comparatively. And I speak like nursery greenhouse wise. Am I going to buy that plant when I know that I have this concern that something's going to happen in the economy? So again, agritourism. Am I going to go and spend money going to agritourism event when I know now that, maybe next month something may happen in the economy that may make us weaker. So again, the big thing, one interesting thing here is with the consumer confidence, we do see we're increasing somewhat, but nowhere near levels we were at before 2020. Why does this matter? I don't know if most of you probably remember what happened around 2008. Big thing happened, the Great Recession. This is just an idea of what happened with respect to turf, right? So I deal with turf. 50% of acres of turf went out of business in 2008 when the Great Recession happened. A lot of those were inefficient firms. Inefficient firms, they didn't have the stability with respect to financial stability to stay in line, or the marketing ability to market their products in a way to stay in business. So again, that's the concern we have, is that with the economy, if something happens, do our firms have the ability to overcome a financial event to remain in business post whatever event? So again, that's one of the big things. This is just turf, but it could be across the board. You could be thinking cotton, peanuts, whatever. If something happens, the market turns, or we have a recession, is there ability there to stay financially secure, to stay in business, to outlast the event? Input costs again, we saw exchange rate sort of stabilizing. Crude oil prices are projected to go up. That's a big issue as far as if you're having to ship things around or actually carry out your operation. If we see costs going up, then now we know that's more money you're having to spend, which are now shrinking margins that you have with respect to for profitability. Projections, these are input costs. This is what the projection was for 2024. We do see some across the board for total input cost going down, but again, these are mitigated by other costs going up or prices going down. So even we do see a negative sort of a decrease here. These aren't substantial to where we were 2020 wise. So again, if you're in 2020 and you all of a sudden you have a 30% increase in price of cost, how do you deal with that? You're probably still dealing with it, and it's probably now hurting, or when you're trying to get financing, do other things now in present day. This just USDA, it reiterates what it said. Basically, the third highest level left of our lifetime with respect to production cost. Fertilizer chemical projected to decline from 23 to 24. Seed costs, labor, machinery, equipment, taxes, insurance are expected to increase. So even though we see those input costs, especially those chemical costs, those input costs going down, other costs are going up at a rate that's now probably exceeding those decreases. So we have lower prices, but increased overall input costs, which is going to cause some issues if something doesn't change, as firms just over time can't adapt or adjust, especially as inefficient firms. Labor, one of the big things, as all of you know, and everybody in the room knows, labor is a big issue. How do we deal with it? Couple things here. We do see a slower labor growth in developed countries. We see expanded labor growth in developing countries. Again, that creates markets. We talked about a minute ago. Those populations need to be fed. Opportunities exist now to compete on a global scale to feed those mouths. So how do we do it as a ag industry in Georgia to now go overseas and compete? On a broader context, by I think it's 2075-ish, we'll have a negative growth rate. Why does that matter? Well, one, there'll be less people, but two, less labor. So again, thinking long term, again, how do we now deal with a labor population that's not going to be there and have as many people to work? So again, thinking about technology and those type of things are really going to be those things we really need to be thinking about and how we adapt and move forward. Other things labor-wise, one thing we see too is that, and this was an NPR article a year or so ago, that they had migrant labor. In the past, you have migrant labor that came in and they would work 10 years. Their kids would work for you on down the line. What we're seeing is a lot of those migrant parents now want their kids to have a better life, and so they're actually moving their kids to go to college and off the farm. So now those generations that would have been there years ago are now moving away to do other things. On top of that, as far as with respect to field labor, where do we get labor just to come over and to work? Again, as we move to more technology savvy, our labor is changing. We're moving from a more of a hands-on to technology. So do we have the higher educated labor that can now run that technology? So if you have, some of you may have saw in the news that they're doing drones for apple pickers. Do we have technology that can now do maintenance on those drones or can actually run that technology compared to what we have in the past as we try to offset labor issues? H2A-wise, again, I think this came up last year, and you probably worked on this. Adverse wage. If you look at the chart down at the bottom, what it says, basically, there's only one state that had a higher adverse wage change last year, and that was Florida. I think it was 16%. Georgia's adverse wage went up 14%. So if you're a producer, how do you now just say, okay, my wage rate just went up 14%? Right? Where does that come from? Right? And so, again, those are issues that are concerning. And one, if someone wants to go into actually start a farm, how can they now justify when you have, the variability in input costs when it's hard to plan? But I think that's one thing. Alabama, I think it was Georgia, Wisconsin, and maybe Mississippi. No, it was on farther down. Maybe Tennessee had wages roughly 14% as well. Everybody else was a lot lower, all the other states. So again, how do you deal with 14%? Just, hey, so if you think about your own home life, if I said, okay, now you have this bill that came up, your bills went up 14%, and you weren't preparing for it, how do you deal with that? And that's what producers are dealing with on how do they prepare for things that just, here's your increased bill. So with respect to intersection of rural and urban, again, this goes into a couple things. One, it goes to our population has no idea about ag. The second thing it goes into is increasing land prices. I don't know if you know what your land rate did or your home price did. Mine doubled, right, when we had a couple years ago. So if I'm a producer, how do I deal with someone comes and said, I'll offer you 2 times as much what the land is worth last year to now produce? So again, as land rates continue to increase, how do we deal with that? The things on the right, the charts on the right came from Purdue, and what they're looking at is since producer sentiment on what going to happen to land prices again, and what's driving this is alternative investment. That's what's driving it from their survey. So as we have land prices continue to go, if I have lower prices, I have higher input costs. I may not have a succession plan to have someone take over my farm. Then someone offers me money to now produce or to buy the land. The opportunity cost now starts swinging into actually making some kind of a switch to getting out of farming, and so that's an issue. We have good cropland going to other issues, going to other uses. You can't get it back. So again, how do we deal with those things? Because those are things. If you're struggling, and someone comes in and says, okay, we want to build a subdivision. We're building a subdivision. So now then, how does that look Georgia-wise to make us more competitive when we have land going out of production, right? So if we're thinking about we're going to go to external markets, international markets, and our production's cut, how do we now leverage going into those markets when we have less acreage and less product to sell? Main reason farmland, this is that producer survey from Purdue. Again, overwhelmingly, everyone, non-farm investment demand was the driving factor they were saying was why they thought land prices were going up. So again, a developer comes in and wants to buy your land. Again, now you have an opportunity cost that's relatively high of doing something else instead of producing. And so again, how do we deal with that? That's an issue really that's, concerning on the level of if that land goes out, it's not coming back. Intersection of rural and urban, again, most of you know the classic example, and this is how it happens, when a child comes up and asks, thinks that chocolate milk comes from a brown cow. Again, this is what's happened with the rural-urban divide with respect to as we're moving, as we do things. Again, I do a lot of nursery greenhouse, LED lighting. LED lighting in greenhouses is a way to increase growth in your greenhouse. Right, so if you put in if I put the exact light and I fill in sun hours, then I can now grow for a longer period of time during the day and get faster growth. But the problem with that is, what about the lights, right? Are they gonna bother someone? Negative externalities. With that, very few people actually experience that. This is a picture from a magazine, from a media article that generated press. Very few people were seeing that. But again, I think it's happening in Georgia of how we deal with that. How do we now deal with the intersection of consumers that may not understand or may not want something happening in ag with a producer that wants to increase yield or increase some kind of technology to help lower some cost, but now then they have issues. And so on the right was a survey we did where we looked at, and most people, there was a group of people that wanted LED lighting regulating greenhouses. After they saw the pictures, they wanted even more, and they wanted the state level, right? So how do we balance that state that regulation piece with that piece of these producers want to increase productivity, increase their profitability? And I think that's a balance we're really going to have to think about as we move forward. One way is put in sunshades for greenhouses. The problem there is they're expensive. So there goes the input cost wise on something we got to really think about. So how do we balance these two things? With respect to domestic-wise, competition-wise, this is a survey we did a couple years ago looking at the Georgia grown label. And what's interesting here is that you see this is Georgia residents and have they seen. So roughly 75% have seen the Georgia grown label in a store. Great. Another 20% have seen it. So 95% have seen a Georgia grown label or aware of it. But what you also see is those other states, also they're seeing those labels in the store as well. So as we go to increase local product consumption in the state, other states are coming in to compete in the Georgia market to take market share, right? So again, great job, Georgia grown. But again, the other states are now doing the same, trying to take market share. So we're competing not only on an international scale, but we're competing on a local scale as well. We can't think we're just going international and forget the local market. If we do that, then what happens is we have other states come in and grab take sales, whether it be fruits and vegetables, whether it be whatever we're selling. And fruits and vegetables, by and large, are the biggest thing for Georgia grown and most grown state grown programs. If you look here, this is looking at North Carolina residents. Again, good presence there. Roughly, if you think of 50% have seen Georgia grown product on the shelves. So we're competing domestically as well. So we're competing other states trying to take their market share. So again, this balance between taking market share, keeping market share, and going and grabbing sort of globally is something producers really need to think about. And I would say one of the issues we have is most producers, especially that level, probably marketing is one of the things that we're probably weakest at, thinking about at that level, how do we market our products and think about where to go. This is state branding. Where are they seeing fruits and vegetables by and large? That's what we're doing. So maybe if there's other products and avenues we could think about putting the Georgia grown on, maybe there's ways now to differentiate ourselves from some other states. But again, I mean, it's one of those things where we are doing a good job, but it's that thing, where do we go and where do we develop put our resources to? State branding, this is fruit and vegetables. Again, this is just where they've seen other states. Again, they've seen the Georgia label, and they're seeing it in fruits and vegetables. So, so we're getting it out there, but now then, how do we now maximize those resources to increase? Competition, so globally competition, I mentioned this earlier. This is cotton exports. We see South America grabbing market share on international exports, and fruit and vegetables, we see that import number continuing to grow. The big issue there, as it continues to grow, are we now increasing fruit and vegetable consumption, or are they pushing out U.S. or Georgia producers? I think the big thing here is I don't think we're eating that many more fruits and vegetables. I think now we're actually pushing out market share that we're having at the state level. With respect to mental health and succession planning, I don't know how many of you thought about this, but it's one of the big things. How do we have that next generation come through? These are study, I can't remember who the study was from, but it's showing that with respect to, there is a stigma on talking about mental health in the production sector of ag and ag in general. So how do we deal with that? How do we deal with keeping those, they're dealing with profitability issues, they're dealing with volatility and pricing, and they're dealing with all those things. How do we make sure that they have the resources with respect to so they continue to stay healthy and to continue doing things they've loved and they've always wanted to do. A lot of these things come down to financing. We see that if someone thinks they're going to fail, then we see that they may have mental health issues, especially because that failure, this is a fourth generation farm, and now it's not working for whatever reason, that we have issues. So how are we dealing with that? How are we doing those things that generally don't think about? Financial Performance Index, this is looking at, from Purdue, with respect to looking at how producers, and this is U.S., but how producers are feeling about the markets, are feeling about the farm, their financial performance. Again, it's low. It's roughly stagnated since 2022. It's not anywhere near where we were in 2021 earlier. So that stress of what's happening in the market is really reflected in what producers are saying about their business financial performance, right? So it's not a disconnect. They're having these issues, and we're seeing it related to when they talk about their financial performance. There is a big issue there on how do we deal with it? How do we deal with lower prices or volatility in prices and increased land costs or increased input costs? Looking ahead next year, this is that same survey. Looking ahead next year, how do you, biggest concerns, higher input costs. That's down a little bit. They do this survey monthly. That is down a lot from what it was in the past, but still, I mean, that's one of the big worries. And then higher interest rates and other things. So there's a lot of things they're worried about. Farm policy, right? So what about Farm Bill? If you're working, if you're working on one of those issues with respect to, you're trying to make decisions, and you don't know when a Farm Bill is going to be passed. I mean, how do you now make decisions of what you're going to do 5-10 years from now, which they should be thinking about of where they want to be in the future? Succession planning. One of the things that we struggle with, I don't think departmentally that we have anybody really doing anything with this. We would love to. I think Extension is starting to do this some. But again, how do we get the next generation of producers? I think we really struggle with that. How do we move someone who may have an interest? I have students come through all the time. They want to start a farm. They want to do something ag. Okay, well, where are you going to get the money to do something that's going to have you financially feasible to do? I mean, it's hard on them to try to say, I want to do that. With respect to a lot of people want to go back to farms. Great, okay. Then how do you now transition from one generation to the next that may have different ideals or different ways they want to do things? So I think that's one of the big things that's out there. Financing. How do we finance? I mean, sort of like, it's how do we now finance something that can cost you several $1 million maybe to start up, that high input cost, or you may want to have to buy something in the spring and you're not paying the money back for the price of it until the fall. So a lot of risk involved. So how do we do risk management is something really to focus on. Other supply side issues, Ukraine, Russia, again, that's bottlenecks in supply. I don't know if a lot of you know what happened in 2020. And I'll ask my students this all the time, why did prices at retail market for beef go up, and why did the producer price go down? Right, that bottleneck. Slaughterhouses shut down, so you can't tell a calf stop growing. So as it hits the time to when you want to slaughter, they're not taking, so you have a surplus on that one side. Well, you're not sending as many through the slaughterhouse, so now you have a shortage on the backside. So now then that is a reason we have an issue with here. So how do we deal with bottlenecks in supply? Years ago there was a study that said there's I think 3 bottlenecks that could shut down the supply chain of the U.S. agriculture. It's very few. It doesn't take a lot to now shut it down. And now what do we do when that happens? Weather, again, what happens with weather with respect to peach crop in 23. I mean, you had high winter temperatures. It knocked out the peach crop. Nothing you can do, but it's one of those things, another issue with respect to how we deal with that. Hurricanes, pecan crop, all of you aware what happened there. Sweet corn, several years ago we had the hurricane come through. It knocked out North Carolina sweet corn, South Carolina, the Carolina sweet corn, and so the price of sweet corn went up, I think it's 120%. When that happened, Georgia producers were excited because, prices went up, and so then a couple weeks later we had another hurricane come through and wipe out Georgia sweet corn. So now no one had sweet corn, so nobody got the benefit. So again, how do we deal with weather? If you're making cars, again, if you're making a car, weather's not that big a deal. It'll sit there till the weather moves through. If you're doing a perishable product that's growing in the field, what do you do when that happens? One of the pictures I saw when the hurricane, when tornadoes came through, it was a chicken house, and all you saw was there was no chicken house anymore. All it was little white dots on the ground with respect to, and so that white dot meant that they were basically probably going out of business, or they couldn't see, they were going to be have a no income for the year. So how do we deal with that? Other things, policy regulations, again, Farm Bill wise, tariff wise, are things that producers are thinking about, and how do we deal with, especially when we don't know what's going on, or we don't know when the solution is going to come about. Demand side. I like doing this. I'm a demand side guy. I talk about demand. Consumers have no idea what's going on. And so this is a study several years ago. Do you oppose mandatory labels on foods that would indicate the presence or absence of DNA? 84% wanted labeling of DNA that was in their foods. Okay, I'm not a great biologist, but I do know that DNA is in all foods, right? So 84% of people wanted that to be, that to label that it had DNA in it. Chocolate milk from brown cows, again, on the right is a study we've done several times, and what we're asking here is, what do you think local is? If I asked you what local was, you'd probably grow in the state, lower miles of transport, those type things. Again, that's what most people said it was, 2 out of 3 said that, but also higher prices. But then you had a group that said that it is lower carbon footprint, fine, better for environment. Okay, that can be argued one way or the other, but fine. But then you had a group that said no natural pesticide use, non-GMO. Okay, those are moving towards with respect to organic. So the confusion of organic and local is one of those things where, consumers have no idea what's going on in ag. And so how do you deal with that when you are dealing with, and I give this example all the time. Most of you probably been in New York City. Someone walks up to you and opens their coat and they want you to buy something. What are they selling you? Selling you Rolexes. So you buy a Rolex, a cheap Rolex. You're all happy about it. You get home and it's not what you thought. It breaks and it says Rolex, not Rolex. Who do you blame? You blame the producer. You blame that person that sold it to you. Now, with you, that's a problem because how many people do I tell? If I have a good experience with your product, I tell 10 to 12. If I have a bad experience with your product now, how many people do I tell? 4,000 to 5,000. Because all I have to do is go post online, and 4,000 to 5,000 people say that you sold me something that is not what I thought it was, right? So how do we deal with this as a producer and educate and with respect to what these things are? We see the flip side of organic and local. People think organic is local is organic. So it doesn't, across the board, we see these things happening with respect to that disconnect there. How do we deal with this? How do we deal with, we want labeling for DNA in food. Years ago, I gave a talk in Quebec, and it had some major retailers there. And one of the retailers afterwards came up, and his comment was, we had a customer call up, and their question was, are apples gluten free? Okay, apples don't have gluten, right? It's not. It's coming from wheat. But again, that's one of the things. That's who you're dealing with. That's who you're thinking about is your customer. So how do we put this on top of that with respect to that group that has no idea what's going on? They're your customer, and how do we deal with them? And how do we now educate from that standpoint? How do we maintain and compete in the world where we have? How do we compete? Right, so there's no easy solutions. How do you deal with higher production costs? You've got to be more efficient. You've got to think about labor. So how do we now interject labor? How do we get the demand to operate that labor? Is I think one of the critical things that's going to be the success or the downfall of Georgia Ag is getting a way to get labor and to handle some of these offsets, some of these costs at the production end. Increased regulations, again, have increased input availability, food safety, hard increased production. Again, new farmland, how do we get that going in production or keep it in production? Or gain efficiencies there? How do we get new producers in to produce? And then how do we increase competition in the global marketplace? And again, I think we've all thought of this in a way of there's one solution to this. And again, I debated on putting this in there, but I did. What's the first thing you see? Okay, did anybody see he's missing an eyebrow? So I put that in there because we're always looking at that one solution, the one solution we always think about. Are there other solutions out there with respect to that we can be thinking about that we're thinking outside the box that may help us solve some of these things? I think, again, I don't have them, but again, the issues we're facing are severe. And how do we now go about thinking about how do we solve them? How do we increase profitability? How do we increase market share, markets throughout globally and keep the markets domestically? I think those are things we do. Everyone succeeds when things are good, but innovators do well when things are bad. How do we now make sure that we're succeeding when things do turn? Because over time, things turn. So we need to make sure that we're in a financial, have producers in a financial position to succeed. So control on ag production, risk, crop insurance, commodity payments, a lot of that's coming from farm bill and those type things. Labor, technology, innovations. How can we now get producers into not only seeing technology innovations, but adopting them? Extension is doing a great job of trying to get this in so we can increase technology adoption. But again, a lot of this is about risk. Do I put in $100,000, $200,000 to put in something that I don't know if it's going to work? New products, non-foods for peanuts would be an example. Waste products for new uses for things that are waste products. are there things out there we can be doing to now increase and add markets? Finding markets globally, domestically, decrease costs, find efficiency, lower costs. Again, new technologies. AI is one of the big things that's now moving forward. There's farms they're using AI to do their production decisions to try to take some of the risk out. AI can now use millions of data points or more to now help and try to get the best time to produce. And then how do we get the next generation and to stay in ag? I think that's one of the critical issues we really got to think about is how do we get people to stay in? How do we get people to come and do? I mean, I get students come all the time. They come from a farm, and I say, okay, what do you want to do when you graduate? I'm moving somewhere else, right? Fine, I want to do something else. Sometimes parents are pushing in that direction, but a lot of times it's I want to go and I see all the hardships and things we have to do to be an ag producer, and I want to do something else. So how do we now get those producers, that generation to stay in? So that being said, I'm done.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell.
In class, I got 75 minutes, and so I jam it in there.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad we're going to have time for the senators to ask some questions,
Yeah.
members of the committee. I wanted to ask a quick question. Over this past weekend, I spoke with several ag lenders in South Georgia, and every one of them has one or two farmers that they are not going to be able to give production loans to this year because they can't make the numbers work. And unfortunately, the overwhelming majority of them are young farmers, the farmers that we desperately need to stay in. I have one friend that he has a young guy that works with him, and he's been helping him trying to get started. This young guy uses all of my friend's equipment, has no equipment costs at all. And he made like 1,300 and something pounds of cotton. I can't remember. He made right at 5,000 pounds of peanuts with no equipment costs. All he had was land rent and his input costs. He was $14,000 short of paying out. So are we on the precipice, if something doesn't change, of another 1980-style farm crisis with what we're seeing today?
I would say, so to keep in mind, in 1980, I was probably 5. So that being said, I think there's a big issue here with respect to, as farm producers get older, and with respect to want to get out, the new generation don't have the money to get in. And so, are we on the precipice of so happen? I don't know. I would say this way, that if things don't change, I think we're going to have problems. If you can't afford to stay in, banks can't give you money. If you're not profitable, you can't. Like, so the gentleman you're talking about, I mean, why as a bank would I give him money next year? Why would I consider doing anything if you can't give it no equipment costs? Why would I now give a loan or give you to do things? So I think there's real issues here on that side of things. If we can't figure out ways now to get new people in, or to mitigate some of the cost, or to create some kind of a risk aversion on price side where we have an idea what prices may be, or I think that's, I don't know if I'm hedging around your question a little bit, but again, I don't know if we're on that side of things, but I think we're headed to it in a way that we can't come back from, because once we lose farmland, it's not coming back.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Professor, for coming today and sharing the information with us. I have 2 questions. One is, I know you probably compare us with other states. Do you see any other states doing a whole lot better than we are?
I think states have some own challenges. I think across the board, you're going to see roughly the same thing. I think some states may have a little bit better with respect to they're more homogenized on what they produce. So they may have, if you have a very diverse group of producers, then that may create a little bit more of an issue compared to a state that just does one thing. Because you can get some economies of scale there with respect to if I am on the machinery side, if me and my 10 neighbors, we all do the same thing, then we can go in and buy equipment compared to if you have 10 different commodities that are being produced, but by and large, it's a national issue. I mean, you saw it on the Purdue data that producers are struggling and they are having issues with respect to, they don't have confidence in what's happening, and I think that's across the board. So again, I think it may vary some, but again, across the board, we're seeing similar issues.
Basically, it's all over the whole United
Yeah,
States.
and so yeah, Georgia's just a microcosm of what's happening there.
My other question was, with issues to ag, have you done any research on how it's affected the state in agriculture of the amount of acres taken out of production due to solar panels?
We have not. I know that's an issue. We haven't really focused on that per se. Just for we don't have anybody really in that area on solar panels. I know I think that sort of needs a sort of law degree to come in as well to help some of that, and we've talked about it. We don't. But the question, we haven't done anything on it, but with respect to answering your question, solar panels are taking up ag land. And so the question becomes, there's questions to ag forecast the other day. It was asked a very similar question. And I mean, if you're taking out good farmland, that's a problem. If you're taking out marginal farmland, not as bad, right? So the question is, what farmland is being taken? So I mean, can we do that? Yes. Should we? Yes. Resource-wise, finding to do it is another issue. So we're working on it. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's sort of, we haven't done anything on it, but yes, something we can do and should be probably moving that direction to do. Yes, it is an issue, especially if we're taking out good farmland.
Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Summers, number 12? 11, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions, please.
Yeah.
Or observations. Where we come from, Senator Watson, Senator Good, and myself, I mean, Senator Walker even too, I mean, we're inundated with large farms, let's say massive farming communities. I would say the people that farm my land have 5,000 acres. That's what the average farmer area to survive.
Right.
You're talking $18 to $20 million worth of equipment, just to farm it.
Correct.
You know, and of course now nobody here is wanting to vote for a gambling bill, but that's the biggest gambling bill in the world, I mean, if you don't mind. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, you're talking about getting new farmers. I had a farmer come to me church one day, and he said, "My son don't want to farm."
Right.
And I said, "Why?" And I said, you got a lot of land. He's a big farmer. He has a lot of land. He's got some older equipment." He said, to get them in the farm where they need to be, they probably have to spend about an excess of about $5 million. They got to go borrow this money. That means they got to put the farms up for collateral. They got to put everything they own up for collateral again, and then it's still a risk. So I guess in all the things you said, I never understood, how do we mitigate that? How do we get the young people to go into farming? Because in my opinion, the only way you can farm is be born into it. I don't see any other way around it, because unless you're, the son of Bill Gates or the son of, Jeff Bezos, where you got unlimited supply of money to get into farming, just to rent the land. I don't know what land you checked for land rents, but it's gone up. And I'll give you another example. The same guy told me he bought a cotton picker 4 years ago that cost him $785,000, a cotton picker. Now, most people don't realize what do you use a cotton picker for? 60 days out of the year? Maybe 60 days out of the year? That same cotton picker today, from 4 years ago, is over $1 million. It's over $1 million that you use something for 60 days out of the year. So when you say the cost, I mean, they're getting bombarded on all sides for fertilizers, everything's, as you know, triple, doubled, whatever you want to call it. How do we get young people to get in if they know these risks are out there, and they'll either lose the family farm or lose everything they have?
I don't know that solution. But I think ways that have been tried in the past and have worked somewhat is that you'll have producers start small and they'll add as they go, especially those who are successful with respect to finding small markets. They get bigger and bigger. And then what happens generally is may start buying as they get more capital and are able to make those bigger loans, then they can get in. I think with respect to the getting someone to take over and that apprentice and training, again, it's going to be the producer that's currently doing is probably going to have some risk, take some of the risk off if they want to keep that land in farming, to someone new coming in. And so the producer who has the already in production takes some of the risk to help the other person come in. Generally, we do that for family. We don't do it for people that are outside the family. And so, again, one of the ways would be outside the family, someone's interested, and they come and do, not apprentice, but they work, and they build up, and then over time, there's a switch that goes on. But with respect to how do we solve it, I don't know. That's fine.
Just to follow
Yeah.
up, do you see large corporations stepping in and literally taking over the family farm because they can do it at such a, they can do it without have to worry about the banks? Is that-
And time.
You see that?
I don't see how else, because what's going to happen is, as we lose production acreage, then if we don't fill that demand through imports, prices will go up, and it'll make it more feasible for those big farms, big firms to come in and step in and do it. So yeah, it's just a natural progression is for, more consolidation around big farms coming in and just vertically integrating or integrating from the production all the way up. And we think we see it in some ag industries already.
Well, back to what Chairman Goodman said a minute ago, back in the 80s, back when we had the farm program.
Senator Summers, I don't mean to cut you off, but these
I'm
two
sorry.
senators have been waiting for like a while. Do you mind if they?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Go ahead with your question, Senator Eccles.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell, for being here. I'll quickly say that my daughter Chloe was in your selling and ag class and said she probably learned more in your class than she has in any other class at the University of Georgia, so well done, sir. Fortunately, she wants to come back and work on our farm, and we're thankful for that. But is there something that you have seen happen in other places where communities, states, other groups are making investments, kind of like we look at economic development, in local farms or agribusinesses or agritourism? Is there anything you've seen happening somewhere else that we should look at here?
No, again, I've lived in Texas, Ontario, and Connecticut here. A lot of the investing in small is not going to feed the world, right? It's not going to feed. So again, it goes back to the question: how do we get the larger scale? With respect to, I think the big thing is a lot of this may come down to local municipality, allowing regulations at that standpoint to let these firms grow, right? And so again, if I'm spending all my time on regulations and that's costing money to do, then why would I go in, right? So I think that's one of the big things we see across is that, how do we make it easier on the regulation side for firms for new people to come in and to grow their farms?
Thank you.
We got one question. I'm sorry. We've got one more question, and we're going to have to call it. We've got a press conference we're supposed to be at 2 o'clock, but I want to thank you, and I hope you would come back again.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Ben, and appreciate y'all studying all this stuff. It's really important information, and my stomach's in knots right now because I fall in that fruit and vegetable category, and the last 17 years of my life I see going away, so it's pretty scary stuff. But do you see one of the solutions as to help our farmers and agriculture is having our federal government and our state government be involved more and investing more, just like they do in a lot of our other sectors of our economy, to help us get through these tough times? And you may not be able to answer that, but I know we help a lot of our sectors of our economies with a lot of different things, and I don't quite see that in agriculture. We can't even pass a farm bill at the federal level, which is huge, and then even at our state level, sometimes we don't invest quite as much in agriculture as we do some of our other sectors. So, and obviously we're in trouble, and nobody has any answers. So, just more of, I guess, of a statement. But do you see that as a benefit?
I see, and I'll be quick. So I see, to not answer your question, but answer it. The more you can take out volatility in prices, or the more you can take out something to help with the input cost side of things, or help in opening up markets, those can only be beneficial with respect to those things. So again, how you do that, I'm not going to say, but again, those are things you can think about with respect to how do you now take out volatility and take out risk. That allows more people to come in, but also makes the farm more stable.
Thank you.
We're going to have to adjourn this meeting, but Dr. Campbell, thank you for coming, and I hope that we can get you back again, because I think you can help us think through some of these problems or what we can do as a state. But I am very concerned, and I know a lot of the members of the committee are, about where the future of agriculture is. And if you see J.R. Goodman come through your class, tell him to straighten up. Thank you, Doctor.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.